To the Finns, the sauna was an absolute necessity. It served many purposes. You went in after a day of exhausting labor and sweated out your weariness along with the grind. You came out relaxed and refreshed. You went in with a bad cold or the flu, sipped a bottle of whiskey, and sweated out the fever. It was wonderful for arthritis, rheumatism, and various aches and pains. Jingo Vitala Vachon from her book, Tall Timber Tales.
Hi, this is Becca, and welcome back to the Sauna Trail podcast. Join us in our adventures as we share the story of how our family discovered the world of Finnish sauna. You might be wondering, why would anyone do a podcast dedicated to something as commonplace as sauna? It's like doing a podcast about fireplaces or basil or hairspray. Well, if you stick around, you might find out that there's more to sauna than you realized. Today's episode brings us back to the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. We had gone the previous year in 2015 for the first time and knew we had to go back. On our return trip, we had so many adventures that we made this into a 3-part series. This episode and the next one will cover the first 2 weeks in the Keweenaw Peninsula. We used 2 different saunas and also viewed a couple other saunas. We did a lot of driving and exploring, so we're splitting our discoveries across the 2 episodes. The third and final part takes place in the Republic area, which is in the more central part of the Upper Peninsula. We'll talk about the beautiful log sauna that we used at that rental. We're also joined by some family there, so we'll get to hear from them.
Thanks, Becca. I'm excited to share all the wonderful places that we went to and the people that we met on this trip. Last week, though, we shared our stories and pictures of the sauna on the island. It was a really unique experience that included run-ins with wildlife and cooking in an outdoor oven and piloting a boat, which was very stressful for me. Probably more so for Christopher, because he was actually piloting. As a mom and a city girl, it was completely out of my comfort zone. You know, our sauna adventures are continually stretching my maternal instinct of keep the kids safe. But I think it's been a good thing for our family to experience the challenges that are scary or that are uncomfortable. I always struggled a bit whenever Christopher would push the kids to do things that I thought were more unsafe than I think they should be. He'd push the kids to climb trees higher or take them to the edge of drop-offs that I would just stand there and hold my breath in anxiety until they stepped away from the edge. And once in a while I would say something or like express my discomfort. And I think one time I remember him saying, "Do you really think that I want to hurt our kids?" And I think I realized at that moment that he wasn't being careless like I had assumed. You know, he was pushing our kids to face their fears or to face these challenges while in the safety of our supervision. And I realized that in doing that, he was actually preparing our kids for the world. So it still worries me. I'm still worried, but I've learned to just breathe and to just be there to clean up injuries and tears. But there hasn't been that many, so that's good. Anyway, I digress there a bit. So let's move on to week 1 of our 3-week trip to the UP. When we had gone in 2015, we went during the last week of October and into the first few days of November. And we learned that most of like the touristy places or the shops actually closed up like October 31st. So this time in 2016, we planned a longer visit because we wanted to be there for a longer time. And then we also went earlier in October. So we went for the last 3 weeks of October. We discovered all sorts of gems and met interesting people. I don't even know where to start.
Well, let's start at the beginning of the trip. We drove up from southeast Minnesota to Rockland, Michigan, and we stayed in a rather informal, not Airbnb type place. I think it was a trailer, but it had an apple tree and it was apple season, so that was kind of fun. And it was so kind of informal and off the beaten path that you just left a check on the table or something like that.
Yeah, or in the fridge, freezer, or something like that.
Yeah. But we stayed in this area because they have a place called Old Victoria Restoration that's a ghost town that's been restored, and it has several log buildings and a log sauna that you can tour. So it has furnished homes today, and they've done a really good job with this restoration, and it used to have 2 log saunas, and these were shared by the hundreds of residents that worked in that mining town. Victoria was shut down in the early 20s, and it was one of the last copper mines in operation in the area. And the Society for the Restoration of Old Victoria was formed in 1974 to fix up those old buildings. And they've done a great job at doing that. So I think I'd found it through a Google search and was curious about their sauna. So I ended up connecting with them, and we went and took a look at it. And I told them about our trip, and we'd taken some 360-degree photos of that we'll show you. And I had actually started asking them about using a sauna with some older Finnish gentlemen. That had been on my sauna bucket list, to use a sauna with like someone over 80, an old timer. And the person I was messaging with thought that was a good idea. But then later, I think someone else came into the messaging thread, and she thought that was a pretty weird idea, and then informed me that they had run out of wood for that year. So I was so close to be able to get my bucket list item checked off, but I somehow crossed a cultural boundary, I think, that I shouldn't have, as a stranger, to be asking something like that. And even now, these 8 years later, after discovering sauna, I'm still trying to understand those social intricacies of sauna. Like which gender saunas with the opposite gender at what time, or which family saunas with the other, or when is it a time for suit, or people don't use suits at all. And I just don't understand that stuff. So,
I think as people who didn't grow up with sauna and don't have Finnish heritage, yeah, we didn't really understand what cultural faux pas we had just committed. And I think different families that are different, I'm guessing that different communities are different, so they probably just do things in different ways, but we just don't really have that kind of rhythm, or
what do you mean by rhythm?
like the rhythm of who goes first, couples, men, women, suits, not suits, children first. Can I ask to sauna with a stranger, or do I need to be invited? That type of rhythm.
Routine.
So these are some pictures of outside of their sauna at the Old Victoria Restoration. You can see it's a beautiful log sauna set kind of back in the woods, which is really nice. And here's the changing room, which has a vaulted ceiling and a candle window. A couple items of note there. And then in the hot room. Now this also has a vaulted ceiling, and I'm not sure that would have been traditional. And most of the older ones I've seen, they've squared off the ceiling so that you don't lose all your heat up there. But they had a continuous wood-burning stove. I'm guessing probably the original saunas were smoke saunas. But it's a wonderful setting, and they've done a really good job. So then the next day we drove up to the Keweenaw, and we stopped for breakfast at Mass City, Michigan, at a place called Adventure Motel and Cafe. Do you guys remember that? We got a kind of a new type of Finnish pancake there.
Had you gone to the Adventure Motel before?
No, I don't think so.
I think we probably talked about it or maybe drove by it.
Yep, maybe we drove by it the previous year.
Yeah. But then this year we actually stopped in and ate.
So it was run by an older couple. And so they had these thick Finnish pancakes, or these oven pancakes. And I'm going to butcher the pronunciation. I apologize, but it's Pancakes. And it's kind of this thick, and I think it's probably had a little bit of cardamom also in it. And I've had it a few times. I think this is maybe my first time having it. And they did an excellent job. It was one of the best that I've ever had.
Yeah, I think when we were in Thunder Bay, we had the thin Finnish pancakes, and we really liked those. And I think I wasn't sure if I was going to like the thicker type, but it was very good. I remember really liking it.
So that was a fun discovery. And we actually, on this trip, discovered all sorts of interesting little shops that we'll tell you about. Were there any of these that were your guys' favorites?
Well, definitely one of my favorites, and I think I speak for all of us here, but certainly one of mine is the Wooden Spoon. So, the Wooden Spoon is a family owned business. It's on Highway 41 in Mohawk. I think we were exploring. It has a kind of unique sign, so I'm pretty sure what happened is we drove by it and then we decided to turn around and check it out. When we walked in, there was a wonderful aroma of baked goods. There were cookies, breads, and pies, but the item that was coming fresh out of the oven was what smelled like amazing. We asked the gentleman who's baking like what it was, and he said, "Oh, it's a fruit cake." He was baking all the fruit cakes that day, and then he was going to soak them in rum to be ready in time for people to purchase around the holidays. So I guess we asked, could we have one like before the soaking process? And we're not sure if he really wanted to sell us one, but he did. He put one in a paper bag while we walked around the little shop. So the wooden spoon has like little souvenirs as well as handmade wooden spoons and cutting boards. They had some antique kitchenware for sale and also a whole counter of canned jellies, jams, and salsas. We bought some other freshly baked cookies along with the fruitcake and headed back on the road.
Yeah, that fruitcake was one of the best baked goods I had. I remember we got back to our rental and had a fresh cup of coffee, and just the fruits in there and the sweetness level was just right. It was pretty good.
I remember the crust was like crisp, but not like hard. And then the inside was soft. And it just had a great texture too. I remember it was really, really good.
Yeah, and we've gotten their cookies before, and those are really good. And actually, on our way out from the Keweenaw on this trip, I remember we stopped by and he had these small little Finnish rye breads. I think he called them rieska. And we had that, and it was kind of more plain, but also still very solid flavors.
Yeah, needless to say, we went back almost every day to see what new goodies would be available. On a subsequent visit, we introduced ourselves to Bruce, who's the owner and baker. I mean, have we had anything from Bruce over the years that we haven't loved?
I can't think of anything. So, and usually when we go up to the UP, we stop into the Wooden Spoon multiple times.
And over the last other visits that we've gone, he actually has started to sell like produce that he's growing. And so it kind of ends up being like a little grocery store for us too, to get some fresh produce. So
Yeah, and our family is rather particular about our baked goods. So the fact that we can't think of anything we haven't liked, that's very telling.
yeah, he does a good job.
Every time that we walk in there, it just smells amazing, like fresh baked goods. And every time I smell that, I'm like, oh, we're in the UP.
So as you drive south on Highway 41, so as we leave Wooden Spoon, we'll eventually hit a town called Calumet. So Calumet's a quaint little town. It has cobbled roads and has like a main street with different shops and stuff. So this time I went to a souvenir shop. I like little souvenir shops. Christopher hates them. I mean, I don't know if he hates them, but he doesn't like to go in them. So he was waiting for us outside.
Yeah, I probably hate them.
He was waiting for us outside while I think me and the girls were in there walking around or whatever. When we came out, Christopher was talking with this woman on the sidewalk. So can you explain how that conversation started?
No, I don't remember how it started. I was just sitting there waiting, but eventually we just started up a conversation. I can't remember if I told her why we were there, checking out Finnish sauna and just exploring the area.
She was super friendly and had a lot to tell us about the UP. Well, we found out that she actually wrote a series of guidebooks from Michigan, including Hunt's Guide to Michigan's Upper Peninsula, which we purchased actually later on when we got home. Her name was Mary Hoffman Hunt, and we kind of wrapped up our conversation and went our different ways. A few days later, we went to Artis Bookstore, which we'll talk more about in just a bit. But who did we run into there? Mary. So we ended up chatting with her at the bookstore for quite a bit too. And After some conversation, she graciously invited us over to her house. And so we set up a time to do that, I think a few days later, and went to go visit her. And she had a box of books to give us because I don't know if we had talked to her at the bookstore, but anyway, she just had it's kind of a random assortment of books that she gave to us. Some kids' books. I think there was like a DVD maybe in there about the history of Ellis Island. So just kind of some historical stuff. And then she took us out to Burger King as a family. And we chatted at Burger King for a while. And she was so interesting. She had so much knowledge and she knew so much about the area. So it was really fun to kind of talk to her and hear about the knowledge that she had. I think later on at some point in the trip, we saw her name on like a political sign.
Yeah, I think she was running for some local office. And so then we got home, I think it was around the election, November 7th. We looked into to find the results in some small race in Calumet. And she didn't win, but we were curious to see what the outcome of that would be.
And I was looking through our pictures, and I don't think we took any pictures with her.
So you'd mentioned that we met Mary in Artis Bookstore, and we've actually been in Artis Bookstore several times. Do any of you guys remember what Artis Bookstore is like?
I don't remember Artis Bookstore super well. I remember we got coffee there once, and I know what it looks like. And down in the basement, we played checkers once, but I'll tell you guys about it. It's a really cool bookstore. It's 2 levels. There's a basement. It's got a giant selection of books, fiction, nonfiction, history, classic novels, and a small collection of children's books.
Yeah, and I think it's actually mostly nonfiction. And the interesting thing about that is they pick books that they really like. So it's a good selection.
Yeah, they have some calligraphy books too. 2 volumes set on Chinese art history and, obviously, numerous sauna books. We met the owners, Tom and Steph, and over the years, they've come to know what we're looking for.
I think Steph even knows if we've purchased any of their sauna book inventory. Like we'll go in and she'll be like, no, I think you guys already got that one. Or she's like, oh, this is a new one. So she does know us pretty well.
Most of their sales come from online buyers, but if you're in the area, stop in the store and check it out.
Yeah, and they really do run a bookstore in kind of the way it should be run because, like I said before, they have really good titles there, but most of their business is from elsewhere, so they just found a place where they can get an affordable building and run their business from, but it's in an area that they like to be in, where they can go and explore and enjoy the natural surrounding. And then they play music there, so it's a lot of fun.
Yeah, I think one time Tom was even playing.
Yeah.
So that was pretty cool.
Like I said, they have coffee and a few cookies or other baked goods.
So we've got a few pictures here. So they have just some different, it's not just books. I think they have antiques. I don't know if this is like a tortilla press. Like that's what it looks like to me, but I don't know what it is. But they just have like all sorts of stuff in there too, not just books.
If you keep driving south on Highway 41, you'll eventually get to Hancock. One of the places we visited there was the Finnish American Heritage Center. We stopped into their bookstore called North Wind Books, and they also have an archive where we found a hymn book that we purchased. They also have an art gallery and community hall that can be rented for events. If you don't remember, we went to National Sauna Week this past February, and the town hall discussion was actually held here at the Finnish American Heritage Center. Down in their archives area, they have an old NEPA stove on display for viewing, which is nice to see.
It is one of the more older stoves, or actually maybe it was the last one that was made while NEPA stoves were made in Bruce Crossing.
Yeah. There's a little sign above the stove. It says, last sauna stove crafted by NEPA Sauna Stoves, Bruce Crossing, Michigan.
And we've used several saunas that have NEPA stoves, and they're good. They put out solid heat.
Then for kicks and giggles, Mama took a 360 panel in their foyer area. Hancock is also where Amy J's Pasty and Bake Shop is located. We won't be talking about pasties this time since we already shared our pasty off contest results in episode 7 and 8. So if you missed those, go back and listen to our ratings of pasties in the UP.
We do really love to try new foods like pasties when we travel. We also like to drive around and explore, and Pops came up with this sentiment that the best roads have no lines. The idea is that small roads or gravel roads lead to interesting places, so we drove a lot around the peninsula. One of the places we explored was Lewis Point, which separates Little Traverse Bay from Big Traverse Bay. It was rugged coastline with rocks and lots of driftwood. And here is a 360-degree photo of Lewis Point. We had driven around that area the previous trip and happened to see this beautiful little sauna. And this trip we drove by it again, and Pops decided that he was going to see if he could meet the owners and see the sauna. We saw the owner driving around on a tractor, so we stopped and introduced ourselves. Fortunately, they were very gracious and kind. Gary and Margaret Kangas showed us the inside of their sauna. It was made out of hemlock from a cabin that wasn't being used. They also said that this area used to be an old fishing village. We chatted more about sauna and where we were staying. We said that we were staying at Skoog Camp. Well, it certainly is a small world because we found out that Margaret's brother is married to Paul Skoog's sister-in-law. Take a second to get that straight in your head. So Gary and Margaret were very familiar with where we were staying. Also, Margaret's brother Jack made sauna stoves. Someone once told us that 90% of the wood-burning sauna stoves in the UP are locally made, and one of the local companies is Elo Custom Saunas in Dollar Bay, Michigan.
Yeah, we drove by that, and I remember being curious, like, what is this Elo sauna? And since then, we've used some saunas with the electric Elo heaters. They're pretty solid, but they're mostly just known in that local area. But they're an old rock tower style heater, as you can see, which has gained popularity in the last 5 to 10 years. But they've been doing it since the mid 60s.
As we said earlier, we do enjoy driving around and exploring every nook and cranny of anywhere we go. Here are a few photos and 360 panos of random places along our drive.
This one is of Brockway Mountain, which has a road that you can drive up and gives you nice views of the area. It's out in the Copper Harbor at the end of the peninsula, so you can look down on Copper Harbor, the city.
People really love going there in October during the fall colors because you can see all of the beautiful changing fall colors from there.
And then this one is not too far away from there, but this is Keweenaw Mountain Lodge in their gazebo. Keweenaw Mountain Lodge used to be owned, I think, by the county, but has been since sold. But they have a lot of log cabins and a huge log lodge that you can check out. And then this is Quincy Mine in Hancock as you're just coming outside of Hancock. And this one here is Brunette Park, which you may have seen as our Facebook banner picture where we took our family picture. And this one here is kind of has an interesting story to it. It's Risto's Hardware. And hardware stores in the UP are super nice because I think they're very practical. So if you go in there, they have lots of stuff, and they're usually some of the nicer stores in town.
Yeah, their hardware stores are like they have a lot of things, but it has never been in like such nice hardware stores than the ones in the UP.
Yeah, they're not necessarily huge, but they have it all packed in there. And this particular one, I didn't realize it, but so that's kind of a Finnish nickname, Risto, and it's from the shortened name of Christopher, which is my name. So eventually, further on in my sauna journey, I'll tell you the story of how I came to be called Risto. But there is a point where it dawns on me, oh, that's my name, Risto.
This picture is Christopher. We were driving around, and Christopher wanted to go up that dirt road across the water. But we didn't know how deep this water was. So he's standing there contemplating whether or not we should cross this with our vehicle. And so he jumped up on the fence with the stick and walked out to the middle of the road and tried to see if he could feel the bottom there as we're all sitting in the van holding our breath, hoping he doesn't fall in.
Really? I was hoping he fell in.
And I think he couldn't get to the bottom with that stick, so we decided that we were not going to drive across the water and stall out the car. So we just kept on driving.
It's a pity. It was a no-line road. Could have gone to someplace real interesting.
That's right.
Yeah, we still haven't been there. There was a sign there for Cliff Mine, and who wouldn't want to go check out a cliff mine?
Anyways, one last thing that I wanted to just share about real quick before we talk about our rental and the sauna was a surprise that Christopher has set up for me. He had made arrangements for me to have a massage in Houghton, which was very nice. I had a lovely massage therapist, and we ended up talking pretty much the whole time that I was there during my session. I told her that Christopher had arranged this, and we were visiting from Minnesota because we love sauna, and we're here in the UP to sauna. And I shared a little bit too about how sauna has been good for our marriage and helping to heal the hurts that we've been kind of working through. And she then actually started talking about the struggles in her marriage and what they were going through. And it was really interesting because she's in Michigan, I'm in Minnesota. You know, we still have friends, we still have family, but we both felt kind of alone. Like as couples, we felt alone in our struggles in our marriage. And it just seemed that everybody around us had it figured out. Their marriages weren't having such as hard times as we were, and you know what was wrong with us. And it was nice to just kind of talk to somebody about that and be like, oh, well, maybe we're not crazy, and maybe we can work through this. I don't know, you know, there's other people that are struggling too, and we just don't know it. And I wish that we had some outlet to be able to, you know, just be honest and vulnerable with people that have gone through those times and has come out on the other end. So, you know, Christopher and I, I don't think we're exactly where we want to be, but we are in a better place. So if any of you are out there and you're listening and it's a dark time in your marriage, like take heart. Like you're not alone. You're not crazy. It can be better, but it just takes work. And it's something that Christopher and I have, you know, we've had to be purposeful about it, and we're not as purposeful as we would like to be. But, you know, I think sauna and travel has reminded us that we're on the same team and we want good things for each other. And life just gets overwhelming sometimes. Like even this week, we've had conversations where we've just both feel so overwhelmed, and we're trying to face it together and trust God for his mercy and for his grace. So that was kind of heavy. Sorry. So we'll get back to talking about sauna and the UP and the wonderful place that it is. So we stayed at Skoog Camp, aptly named since the owner is Paul Skoog. It's located on Big Traverse Bay, which has a really nice sandy beach. We stayed at the same bay last year too, didn't we?
Yeah, the last time that we went up to the Keweenaw, we stayed at that same bay. And in fact, I think I had even considered staying at Skoog Camp the last time, but we didn't end up choosing that one. But so then this year we decided to stay there.
So it's a cute little blue house, and it has a little blue sauna, wood burning sauna that faces the water. And I think there's a few of you guys who has listed Skoog as your favorite.
I have in the past. I think that was maybe the first sauna where it was a good sauna and it was right to the water, smooth sandy beach.
Yeah, I really enjoyed this sauna because it was one of the first saunas we'd used where the heat was hot, but it wasn't super harsh. And it was a larger sauna, so we all fit in there. And then going out to the water was amazing. And yeah, like Nala said, it was super sandy and clear water.
Yeah, I've got some pictures of you guys playing in the water, even separate from sauna. You guys really loved it. Daniel is my pantless wonder child. So you can see, unlike the other kids, he isn't wearing pants. So I always called him my pantless wonder.
Yeah, and then here's a picture of us. We decided to run all into the water, maybe in our birthday suits. It's hard to say. There was some controversy when we originally posted this, so I decided to make this version where everything's fully blurred out.
And I think the kids are older now, so they're like, no, please blur it.
Please don't show the original.
So there's another little interesting tidbit that happened when we were here. That isn't sauna related. We were playing Monopoly with the kids, and we don't have Monopoly at home, so it's not something that we played regularly. We were playing it, and I think at some point one of the boys wanted one of Nala's properties, and she's like, well, why can't I just give it to them? And we were like, well, that's not the point of the game, though. She's like, but if I don't need it and they need it, why can't I just give it to them where I can just sell it to them for like $1 or something? I think Christopher at that point looked at her like, yeah, that's actually a good thing that you want to do that. Yeah, and then I think at that point we realized that how Monopoly is just a game of greed. And what was it teaching our children? Do you remember that, Nels?
Yeah, I think we were on teams because it was one of the first times we had played that. And I was on your team, Mama. And you're like, well, we don't want to do that. And I was like, well, I don't really need this property, but they need it to finish their Monopoly, so.
It's always those kind of interesting experiences you have as a parent.
Yeah.
Helps you see things with fresh eyes that maybe you hadn't seen before.
Yeah, it was definitely a perspective of the game that it never even occurred to me at all. We'll show you some pictures of the sauna in just a bit, but in preparation for this recording, we had asked Paul if he had stories about sauna or just anything that he wanted to share about sauna, and he sent us this great response, and I'm going to have Daniel read it.
I grew up on a small farm in a Finnish community in northern Minnesota, so sauna is a big part of our life. Our family, as well as many others, didn't have an indoor shower or bathtub, so a sauna was our primary method of bathing. Saturday night was sauna night, which meant either visiting a neighbor or relative whose sauna was hot, or more often having sauna company. We did, however, bathe more than once a week as the sauna was hot at least once a week in the winter, and every night during fieldwork season. The UP sauna kind of brought me back to my childhood days, as when it was built in 1984, was once again the only way of cleaning up other than ice-cold Lake Superior. For a number of years, the road past the camp was dead-end. There was no electricity or phone, and water was from a spring down the road. A week there was truly a week away from the world. The newly built sauna was a godsend for the kids, providing a place to clean up after a hot day on the beach, a place to warm up on cold days or rainy days, and hours of entertainment steaming in the sauna and then running and diving into Lake Superior, no matter how cold it was. A tradition they fondly remember and an experience they are passing on to their own children. There is, however, one experience that, despite multiple warnings from adults, young boys can learn only by doing. They think it would be funny and impress their sauna mates if, instead of throwing water on the rocks, they stood on the top bench and peed on them. This is only done once as the smell is horrendous. It doesn't rapidly go away and is not enjoyed by adults using the sauna for several times after. The punishment for this discretion in our sauna is removal of all the rocks on the stove, followed by vigorous scrubbing and then replacing them.
I'm happy to say that you boys have never done that.
That we know of.
This is true.
You would have known if we did do it. It would have smelled terrible.
It would have smelled terrible. I don't even want to think about how bad that would smell. So, let's look at the 360s of the sauna. Thank you, Paul, for that email. That's a great story and a great history that you have with your family and that area.
So this is outside of Skoog Camp. You can see it has a great view of the lake and a boardwalk. And they have a nice deck to sit and relax there. I remember sitting out under the starry sky. Do you guys remember this?
Yeah, just looking at this photo, I remember the first few nights that we stayed at Skoog Camp, we slept kind of in the outer four-season porch area, and I remember hearing the waves of Lake Superior and going to sleep to them for the first time, and it was really peaceful.
So here's the changing room. It's a pretty good sized changing room. It has a candle window.
Yeah, and a lot of these older saunas, there's a lot of candle windows.
A feed from the changing room into the hot room.
All sorts of beach toys.
And then the hot room in the sauna.
So if you see next to the stove, it looks like a keg with the top sawn off, and that is a water reservoir. So I think this is the first sauna that we used that had a water reservoir attached to it. So as we heated the stove, it would also heat that water. And so we had warm water to bathe with. So also if you look by the water reservoir, you can see the railing there, but it also acts as like a footstool or a place to put your feet up and warm them up. I liked that a lot because my feet are always cold.
Yeah, the dimensions were good in here. And then there's 2 windows that can be opened for ventilation. And the view outside of that, the window on the left, looks out into the trees and Lake Superior. It's a great view from this hot room.
There's a few pictures here too. This picture here is, I think it's one of my favorites. Every time I look at this, I just feel at peace and comforted. There's just something about looking at that bench and the water and the boardwalk and the sand. And if you look, I'll go to the next one. So if you look to next to the boardwalk is a metal bucket. And I don't remember if it was the instructions were at this sauna or if it was a different one where they don't want sand being tracked into the sauna. So every time you come back, before you step onto the boardwalk, we had to step into the bucket, rinse your feet, rinse all the sand off, and then you can get onto the boardwalk and then walk to the sauna. We always did that. And I mean, you can just see the pure joy on Hudson's face coming out of that hot sauna, ready to go into the water. He was so happy. This is a pile of their wood that they had there. We won't have to worry about running out of wood with this sauna. So that is Skoog Camp. And then one other quick little thing I wanted to share was the beginning quote at the beginning of this episode talked about aches and pains and sweating out a fever. So forewarning, this is probably a little bit too much information for some of our listeners, but I'm going to tell you the story anyways. One of the days we were saunaing, I started to feel the symptoms of a UTI, urinary tract infection, and I hadn't had one in years and years and years, but I still knew what the symptoms were. So I finished saunaing and I was telling Christopher, like, I don't know what's going on. I think I might have a UTI. And he goes, oh, okay. So I pushed a lot of fluids that day. And then the next morning, Christopher got the sauna really, really hot, like hotter than normal, and suggested that I go in and sauna in the higher temp. So I went and I did that. I did a few rounds. Really, really hot, lots of steam. And I remember by the end of the day, next morning, I did not have any more symptoms. This is not medical advice. This is, not like don't get checked out, just go in a sauna. But I wanted to share, like, I think there is something about sauna and illness and what it can do. Because, I mean, we were out in the middle of nowhere, and we were away from home. So I wasn't going to go to a hospital and get antibiotics or anything like that. So that was an interesting little experience that we had there. There is one more picture that I wanted to show, and I forgot that we had done this. And so this is, I think, Becca's handwriting, and the list is how we used the sauna today. Benefits of using the sauna today. And the first one was raising mama's body temperature to fight an infection. We used hot water for dishes. It's a nice place to talk. Fun to jump in the water. Coals from the sauna stove used in grill to cook sausage for dinner. It made us clean, relaxed, and fresh, and it was a sleeping aid. So that was really fun to look at and remember. I think we did this together as a family, but I think Becca wrote it down on her little list and we took a picture of it. So any of you guys want to share any memories you guys have from Skoog Camp?
I don't really remember Skoog Camp, but the one thing I do remember is washing my feet in that metal thing before going on the boardwalk.
Probably because we drilled it into you so hard.
Dale's just like, wee!
Skoog Camp will always be this special place for me because a lot of the things in the UP that I first experienced were while we were staying at Skoog, and that was like the first sauna that I really enjoyed and remembered and wanted to go back to.
Yeah, and we do end up returning back to Skoog Camp with some family. It is, one of my favorite saunas. probably in our family's like top 5 saunas, it's probably like up there. Excellent sauna and excellent location. And we thank the Skoog family for sharing it with us.
Well, thanks for joining us today. That wraps up the first week of this UP trip. Next episode, we'll share even more gems discovered during our second week. Come back and hear about an amazing homemade apple cider, delicious smoked fish, a bakery run by monks, more beautiful scenery, and another historical sauna site. If you haven't yet, join our locals community and say hi. If you enjoy our content and would like to support this podcast, Locals has that option as well. The address is thesaunatrail.locals.com. We appreciate all of our supporters and fellow sauna hounds. Our podcast can be found on Spotify, iTunes, YouTube, and other streaming platforms, as well as our website, thesaunatrail.com. New episodes release Saturdays, which is the traditional Finnish day for sauna, also called Sauna Päivä. We hope to see you on the Sauna Trail.